I'm Chris Jorgensen, IPC Staff Liaison for the IPC Technology Roadmap Committee. This webinar is designed to help you learn how to leverage the IPC Technology Roadmap in order to support your organization's business plan and market strategy. Before we begin, I want to touch on a few housekeeping items. First, if you have a question during the presentation, enter it into the chat window. Time permitting, we will address as many questions as possible at the conclusion of the presentations. Once again, I would like to thank you for joining us today, and I will now introduce our presenters for today, Marc Carter and Karen Carpenter. Marc Carter is Tech Site Supervisor, Printed Circuit Engineer with SAIC Incorporated. He has worked in the electronics interconnection industry since 1984 in a variety of roles in fabrication and assembly materials, processes, environmental compliance, and supply chain management activities around the world. Marc graduated in 1975 as a chemical engineer from Michigan Tech and had honest work right up until getting into the electronic manufacturing industry. He also received his MBA from Nova Southeastern in 1993. Along the way, Marc has had the honor and privilege of working with and learning from many of the true giants of the industry. Karen Carpenter is president of CMTC Associates Incorporated, a marketing and technology consulting firm which provides guidance in developing business and market strategies. She began her career 34 years ago with IBM Microelectronics, holding positions in engineering, finance, strategic planning, and marketing management, spanning the areas of chip packaging, printed circuit boards, and electronic assembly. Prior to CMTC, she was the Director of Marketing for Endicott Interconnect Technologies. Karen has been recognized for her work in business process management and has extensive background in developing market intelligence and strategies, brand management, and marketing communications. She is an active member of IPC, receiving the IPC Presidents and Distinguished Service Awards. She has been a section leader and contributor to the IPC Technology Roadmap for more than 5 years. She holds a BS in chemistry from Binghamton University and received her marketing education through IBM's professional development programs. Our first presenter will be Marc Carter, followed then by Karen Carpenter. Whenever you are ready, Marc.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to this informational webinar that is designed to help you use this information source to prepare you and your business to survive and succeed now and for the next 5 to 7 years. I'd like to thank you particularly in light of everyone's extremely busy schedules for taking the time to sit and listen to this. I think that we hope that we'll be able to help you in making the hard choices with your limited resources and uncertainties of the future to use this technology information and other sources of information to prioritize, plan, and implement your business strategy going forward. This is a labor of love for many of us. It is a massive effort. We have input from 150 companies from around the globe this year, far superior to our previous efforts. We try to improve this information resource with each release. I believe we succeeded quite well this time. The information truly represents a global snapshot of what many people from many different sectors of the industry see as current and future needs. That said, one of the things we hear quite often is that this is a massive piece of information. I can't possibly sit and read through all this and absorb it. And the answer is you don't. The object of this information resource is not to read it like a novel, but to use it as a reference document. It is, if you printed it out, and I would strongly recommend that you don't, it might run to 700 or so pages. The information therein is from so many sources and takes such level of effort to collect and collate and analyze and present that it would only be accessible to the very largest of companies. They would be the only organizations with the resources to duplicate this effort, and in fact many of them have concluded that it is better to devote that effort to their internal efforts and are starting to rely more on this document, the INEMI roadmap, and other industry specialists in collecting and collating this information, just because it is such a massive undertaking. It's only successful because of the efforts of literally hundreds and hundreds of volunteers that have helped us put this thing together. So with that, if you have a piece of information or an interest area that you're curious about or need to understand in order to plan for your future, the first approach would be to look through the table of contents, which is electronically linked to the rest of the document. So if you highlight the area of interest selected, it'll take you there. If that turns out to be not quite the answer that you needed, there is a word search function. Because this information is so interlocked, the information contained in this document is cross-referenced many places because, as those of you familiar with the industry are aware, nothing changes in isolation. Everything is related to everything else. You can't change just one thing, and you can't consider a fact in isolation. You can do a word search. You may have to do some filtering at that point then to find exactly the concept or idea or answer that you need. And that will perhaps get you to where you need. Also, the IPC has a mechanism, and they'll be discussing it at the end of this presentation, on how you can submit questions on how to use and how to find information. All right. This document can do many things for you, and there are many valuable references, valuable pieces of information, valuable insights in it, but it can't solve all your problems. We always encourage everyone that's faced with trying to plan for the future of their organization, plan for the future of their technology investment and resource planning, their capital investments on which technologies to invest, to consult as many of the pertinent reference documents that you can get your hands on. We can help you with the technology of how to accomplish a specific operational goal, a specific fabrication or assembly task, which task to undertake. We can point out the pitfalls and obstacles and what you might expect to have to do to reach that goal, but we can't pick the goal for you. That's unique to your business and your situation. Each technology roadmap, good technology roadmap, is an ongoing effort, a continuous effort, and starts from what is known now. Where am I? How does my company's offering and capabilities compare with others that are in similar sectors? That can tell you some things that you may need to address in the short term to continue to address a specific market segment. The market segment you're in today will change. It is changing over time. To keep up, you have to do a certain amount of investment planning, training, process improvements. It may be such a thing that there are other technology areas that might be attractive to you. This document will also help you determine what you might need to do to accomplish that transition. A technology roadmap predicts, to a degree, the technology options that will exist soon. We don't try to reach too far out into the future, basically a little longer than the capital appropriations cycle. So on the order of 5 years. We have some areas where we reach out to 10 years, but that's gets much more speculative. And we'll point out the various areas of technologies and what you will need to do to reach them. It will identify some of the obstacles and some of the barriers that exist, some of which are overcomable by time, effort. Some require financial investment. Some require a technology or piece of equipment or skill set that does not yet exist readily. And we try to forward those and help with those developments as we can with other like-minded organizations. Just like an auto roadmap, this technology roadmap can identify the obstacles and help you decide whether it is worth your organization's time and effort and money and resources to overcome those obstacles. It cannot choose which path your organization should take. You know who you address, whose market you're addressing today. Is that the market that you intend to stay in? Or is there something more lucrative? Or are there elements of that current marketplace that will make it more unattractive in the future and you'll be looking for alternatives? All of those things this roadmap can help you identify. It cannot decide for you, however. That still comes down to good old-fashioned business planning and business sense. And we can help you with the tools. We can't necessarily use the tools for you. And with that, I would like to pass this on to Karen Carpenter, who will give you some more details on how to specifically implement this information resource for your business.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Before we launch into exactly how to use the roadmap, I'd like to go through a little bit more information with you to help you understand how the roadmap was actually created. Mark talked to you about it being a reference document, and he talked to you about it being a massive effort. The roadmap really starts with an information gathering that's done by the market research and technology staff from the IPC. Surveys are generated and sent out to companies across the world. And the graphic that you see on the screen here is an example of the type of distribution we got with people who actually answered this survey. And while we got a lot of responses from the U.S., it was really encouraging to all of us to see that Europe and China, Taiwan, Japan, all across the world, we got responses back to share with us the level of technology that people across the supply chain see. That information is analyzed and torn apart by a very diverse group of people, including OEMs, suppliers, fabricators, EMS companies, and consultants who all volunteer their time. We're not compensated for this. They volunteer so that they can take a look at this information and put it in a usable form we call the roadmap. Now, why would people go invest this kind of time? Well, first and foremost, anyone who works on the roadmap really gains valuable information. They bring to the table their knowledge, but they gain information about the overall state of the industry with the exchange of data that goes on during this process. They also, in many cases, will come to the table and participate because they've got a specific need or a gap in their technology, and they're really looking to highlight that so that people understand what is needed in the market. And finally, we have people that have joined the roadmap because they want to share their insights on new or emerging technologies that they see coming down. So how's the roadmap structured? There's really 5 towers to this roadmap. And in the first section, called General Overview, You're going to find the background information. You're going to find information about how this roadmap fits with other roadmaps, as Mark mentioned earlier. You're going to see a discussion of what OEMs and integrators need from the supply chain. You'll also see a presentation of what technical attributes we get from the survey by application space or by market segment, where we are today and where we're going in the future.
Excuse me, Karen, I think you're still showing on the first screen.
Oh, I have no idea why. Hang on, let me. Can you see the first screen again?
Yes, just the how it's built, how it's structured, what kind of data it contains is up.
Okay, and I've changed screens. Can you see how the roadmap is created?
No. You may need to share a different screen. If you've got two up, you may need to share a different screen, Karen.
Okay, now what can you see?
There you go.
There you go.
I apologize to everyone. Technology is wonderful, except when it doesn't work right. Okay, let's go to the towers. This overview section, as I've mentioned, has a lot of information. There's also an overview of the standards and specifications that are available to the industry, and a very detailed review of what's going on with environmental controls and regulations, because it is a far-reaching aspect of our industry today. The technology trends section is where we start presenting the data that we've collected and start drilling down into it. First, it's presented as an aggregate. In other words, for each technical feature, we'll present where it is today and where it's going in the future. There will be a discussion of what's going on in the semiconductor industry and its impact in packaging. We like to touch on connectors and sockets because that has an impact specifically in the assembly areas. There'll be a detailed discussion about technology reliability and how reliability affects different segments and what the requirements are in different segments of the market. This is also the place where we'll put key emerging technologies. And you'll find a write-up in this particular roadmap about printed electronics and embedded components and what's happening in terms of materials. The design tower will take you through what's going on with data and tools under consideration for building overall system architectures and reliability as it's driven from a design perspective. You'll see information about trends and methods and overall data structures. You'll see a discussion about system configuration. And finally, you'll see a discussion in this particular section about how components are selected and the impact on design. Two of the largest sections will be on printed circuit fabrication and on assembly. Under printed circuit fabrication, we'll introduce 4 printed circuit platforms. Those platforms are interposer and modules, in other words, the chip packaging type of platform, a platform that we designate for portable boards, a platform for product boards, and a platform for backplanes. We'll group the data that we find into those 4 circuit platforms, and we'll talk about what global build capabilities we see out there by region. All of this information collected via the surveys that we've sent out. You'll see a detailed review in these sections of the build process, materials, and equipment. It'll highlight the challenges and gaps and technical solutions that people have in the area of printed circuit fabrication. It'll also provide by each platform an assessment of the needs and any gaps there are in the area. In this roadmap, there is an optoelectronics is reviewed. in great detail, and we summarize the key interconnect trends as it affects the entire printed circuit fabrication sector. Finally, the information on assembly follows very closely to that of the fabrication section. Again, you'll see information on the assembly and test materials and equipment found today and what's needed for the future. There'll be a whole area dedicated to passive and active components and the impacts on packaging structures. You'll see both long-range and current technical attributes presented for each one of the emulators or market segments. Again, you'll find that same review of the issues, gaps, and potential solutions. And this information will then be rolled up with a detailed review by platform for interposer, portable board, product board, and backplanes. Now, to understand what you're going to do with this information, it's imperative that you understand the benefits that the roadmap is going to provide you. So, of course, we're all in business to make money. And what we tell clients is, while it takes a lot of investment, many times they think in terms of capital investments that they have to make for their business. One of the most important things you can invest in is dedicating resource to taking the time to develop a market and business strategy. What do we mean by strategy? It's really a carefully thought out plan that usually takes place over a long period of time. What should your strategy look at? Really composed of three elements. Taking a look at where you are now. Where is your business coming from? What's happening within those markets? Are those markets mature? Are they going to grow? Are they going to shrink? Where do we want to go for the future? Is your growth objective going to be met within the markets that you serve? Or are you going to have to enter new markets? And with all the markets out there, which ones make sense? And finally, you want to take a look at the steps that you're going to have to take to ensure that you are successful in your business. How well are you positioned within your target markets? All of this market research comes to you from many different places. The IPC roadmap is a resource that you can use to glean much of this information. Now, the IPC roadmap has taken great pains to segment the market, and understanding the way the market is segmented is critical to developing any type of market strategy. What we've done within this roadmap is broken it into market segments that we call emulators. We call them emulators because we're not pointing to any one given type of product. What we do is we pull these products together into end groups where the products have similar technical attributes. They operate under similar conditions. They're controlled with similar regulations. This way, the OEMs are able to share with us information about what they need today, what they need for the future, without fear of sharing information that's specific to any one type of product. We collect that information in a fashion that you can see in the graphic that's here on your screen. There will be 5 major emulator groups. And they're listed as consumer, computing and telecom, industrial and automotive, military, space, flight, extreme types of environments, and finally biomedical and life support. Within each one of those areas, we ask questions about those 4 platforms or form factors. So we're looking for information from the people who take the survey about where they stand with chip packaging in terms of interposer and module, what attributes are being used today and in the future for portable boards, product boards, and backplanes. So how do we present this information? Well, here I've got an example of minimum line width and spacing as one technical attribute. The first thing we'll do as we present this data in the roadmap is to roll it up at the highest level. So the graphic that you see shows what minimum feature and what minimum feature spacing you'll find today in the industry and where we need to go in the future. This is an aggregate of all sectors rolled up, and it is presents where we are in terms of the finest line width and spacing you'll see in the industry. We'll then take that information and we'll present that same data, but we'll break it into the emulators that we talked about earlier. So we're looking at finest or smallest feature lines and spaces for the current environment and where we're going in the future. And we'll break that information into 2 categories, revenue center of gravity and state-of-the-art. The revenue center of gravity represents where a minimum of 90% of the revenue is generated at that particular technical level. So you can see in the graphic the emulators that are listed with the minimum line width and spacing in terms of where the bulk of the market is and then where the state-of-the-art is, the finest line width and spacing that you'll find. This is one example of all of the technical attributes that you'll see contained within the roadmap. The next thing we'll do is drill down and we'll summarize all of the technical attributes that we get, and we'll break those technical attributes into each one of the product platforms and each one of the market segments or emulators. So you can see from this example, the portable printed wiring board platform and a sample of some of the technical drivers that we've looked at, like board thickness or layer count, line width and spacing. And then we show the user what the data shows us in terms of what you'll find in the consumer space, in the computing space, and in the biomed space, where you would expect to find portable printed circuit boards. An example that you might see in the assembly section, this for product boards found in the telecom industry. You can see the technical drivers that are listed. For example, the number of discrete components or the maximum array number of components. You can see what the revenue center of gravity is today, and you can see the metric that we have discovered for state-of-the-art, and then where we expect that technology to go in the future. So the roadmap has drilled into the data and provided it to the users in several different ways, depending on how you'd like to look at it. We take it even one step further now that we've laid out all of this technical data. Now we break it into the fabrication side of the industry, where we look at things like materials of construction, and we look at each process step and the equipment associated with the process step, and we drill down into those materials of construction, and we go through things like what type of glass cloth is being used, or where we are with HDI, what processes, what type of HDI techniques are in place. We'll look very similarly in terms of all the process steps, and an overview of the equipment, all the way from photo tools through solder mask and inks that one would find in the industry today and where we're going for the future. On the assembly side, in a very similar fashion, you'll see the materials that are consumed and the equipment that's being used. You'll also see a detailed discussion about components in terms of everything from passive devices through optical types of components. And on the assembly side, you'll also see a detailed discussion of where we are with test, both at assembly test and full functional test. The thing that I'd like to drive home here is that in these detailed discussions, not only are you looking for information, and you'll receive information about the current technology that you find, but there will be a lot of discussion about the issues that we have with that technology. What's needed for the future? If there are potential solutions out there, those are presented along with where there are holes, where are the gaps. And we like to go through a detailed discussion about possible major change, possible paradigm shifts, and what impact that will have on technology for the future. So in summary, for this particular section, the roadmap will provide you with many, many insights in terms of technical detail, all contained within a single document. Now that you understand a little bit about the document itself, I'd like to talk to you about how you would go about using this document to develop a business strategy. The first thing we tell clients is take a look at where you want to go. What is the vision for your company, and what are the goals and objectives that you have to drive home to that vision? Once you establish that, you can then move forward with your market analysis. And this is where the roadmap is extremely useful in developing your market analysis. So the first thing you want to do in that market analysis is take a look at where your business is currently positioned within the markets that you're servicing. You always start with what you know. Who are my customers? How well am I doing with my customers? Where are my wins and where are my losses? What are the technical attributes of those wins that I have in the markets that I'm servicing today? Where am I losing business and why? And what are my customers telling me I need for the next 1 to 3 years? You can then use the roadmap to balance that information. The roadmap is going to help you understand where the industry as a whole is going. So you look at the roadmap in terms of the markets that you're servicing, and you can challenge the feedback that you're getting from your customers. It'll also give you insight into potential customers you have in the markets that you're servicing, but you haven't been able to win business from them. It tells you where the overall market is going. You can identify your strengths and weaknesses within that market, and you can identify if there are specific things that you need. Are there capabilities that this market is going to be looking for that I don't have today? Conversely, you may have a capability out there that the market has not asked for yet, but the roadmap is telling you it's going to need for the future. That particular capability will put you in a great competitive position, and you can build your strategy around moving forward in that particular market segment capitalizing on that capability as something that you are first to offer to your customer base. The second thing that we do with this is we recommend to our clients to now take a look at, are there markets that I'd like to get into that I'm not participating in today? I think it's very rare that we find a company that doesn't want to diversify their portfolio to grow into new markets so that they are not held captive to revenues only obtained from a single market. To use the roadmap here, what you want to do first is identify the potential markets that you'd like to go into. You can then dive into the roadmap so that you can understand what are the attributes of that market. It's very important that you take a look at what type of technology these new markets that you are not playing in now are going to need. You have to be prepared to offer that type of technology. And once you understand what that technology is and what the roadmap is telling you, you can take a look at how well you're positioned. What offerings do I have right now? What are the capabilities that I'm going to need to meet the objectives that this market has? Anytime you enter a new market, you have to also consider where that market is going. And that's one thing that the roadmap is going to help you really understand. You can't enter a new market without looking at what I'm going to need in the next few years, because while you may be new to the market, that market is constantly changing. So what are the gaps? Where is this market going in the future? Does it represent opportunity to me? Or is it a threat that are there things that are going to change that I really won't be able to keep up with? Once you take a look at this information and you take a look at how the roadmap is telling you this market is going to change, you can develop a plan for investment that you may need to make. Perhaps, for example, you need to hire a new program manager, someone who is well positioned in a market you'd like to get into that's going to help you get in there very quickly. Perhaps you need to invest in a new type of capability. You may not be an HDI today, but that market that you want to get into is moving rapidly into HDI. You have to invest in the skills and capability to play in that market. You may need new tooling. You may need to invest in something completely different in terms of test equipment, for example. The roadmap is going to help you to understand in great detail what type of investments you'll need to make, because it spells out what's going on in those markets and where they are going for the future. Finally, the roadmap can help you understand some of the more global issues, the issues that are affecting the entire electronics industry. For example, the drive to sustainability, the regulations that are being put forth, the changes that are coming to the industry. The roadmap dedicates an entire chapter to answering those types of questions. You may be interested in looking at semiconductor trends and what's happening there in terms of packaging. Packaging may be an area that you would like to get into. The roadmap will also present you with a detailed review of printed electronics and embedded components to emerging technologies that you may find are impacting the segments that you'd like to get into. And finally, design. The area of design impacts the entire supply chain, and the roadmap will help you to understand if there are changes coming in the way of design tools or design techniques. When you look at these global areas, you have to ask yourself, do they represent opportunities for my business, or am I going to be faced with a threat, either immediately or long term? And you can buffer yourself to develop plans and actions to manage your business within your strategy. Now, when we put this roadmap together and we put this webinar together, one of the questions that I threw out to the team is, what type of questions might be on the minds of people that they would be able to find answers to within the roadmap? So here's just a sampling of the types of questions that the creators of the roadmap are throwing out there for your consideration. Perhaps you're thinking about what might happen in your market space in terms of high-frequency materials. It's not something you see today, but will my market eventually move into these high-frequency materials, and when, and do I need to be prepared? Perhaps you're considering printed electronics, and you want to know what areas printed electronics will take hold in, and what barriers there are to entering this particular space. Perhaps you've been thinking about 01 or 05 components, and you want to know what applications will truly require placing those components, or is there a potential that those components will have to be embedded within a circuit board? Perhaps you've heard about chip stacking, and you want to know, is that going to impact the complexity of printed circuit boards? Or there might be some issues with optoelectronics. You've heard about optoelectronics for a lot of years. Is it really coming to fruition? Where is it going to be adopted, and is it going to impact me? The creators of the roadmap, the people that are experts in their fields, have said that the roadmap will answer all of these types of questions. So I'd like to leave you with a thought. The electronic supply chain that we have that we all participate in this industry is extremely complex. There are many, many facets to it. And while at the top of the supply chain you have decisions being made by OEMs or integrators on one hand, or the chip manufacturers, the IDMs, the integrated device manufacturers on the other side of the supply chain, the decisions that they make, the technologies that they need, are driven down and drive change across the entire supply chain. The OEM may want to move in a particular direction, but unless the fabricator or the electronic assembly people can actually meet their needs, they won't be able to move in that direction. By the same token, they may need specific technology from the IDMs, and the IDMs have to be able to deliver that technology packaged through the OSATs, or the semiconductor assembly and test people, which in turn need the printed circuit structures that they get for packaging from the fabricators. And none of this happens without the materials and the equipment and the components that come from all aspects of the supply chain. Of course, everybody is impacted on the ability to design. If you can't design the system and those needs can't be met throughout the supply chain, none of this overall electronics supply chain works. Make a change in one area, it ripples through everything else. A great example of that is what happened with lead-free. While lead-free was needed, new materials were needed, every aspect of that supply chain was impacted by the drive to lead-free. Understanding those roles and understanding who makes decisions within the supply chain is absolutely critical when you're building a strategy. Knowing the state of technology today and knowing where it is most likely going to go and where those gaps are presents opportunity and presents very important knowledge to you when you're developing a market strategy. Change happens in this industry. Many times we find that there is a shift because an entire disruptive technology is introduced. A total paradigm shift takes place. Being able to have some visibility to that before it happens allows you to plan for it, allows you to buffer your strategy against possible impacts. Finding a source of that information is absolutely critical. The IPC roadmap rolls that information up from a variety of sources, and it really presents to any potential business a succinct reference document that you can use as one critical element of your market analysis and your market planning. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much for your attention to this webinar today, and I'd like to return the controls back to Chris.
Again, we'd all very much like to thank you for attending this webinar. If you've got questions, you can submit them either through the chat box that's off probably on the right-hand side of your screen, or we've given you a dedicated email address, that one at the bottom there, roadmap@ipc.org. If you think of a question, any question related to this topic, and want to get some response after you've had a chance to think about it, please use that roadmap@ipc.org. That's roadmap@ipc.org, and we'll parse that out to the appropriate person. If it's a customer service question or a technical question, or if it's more detailed and specific technical question, we've got a bunch of people that have helped us with this and are standing by to help answer your questions. If you, after seeing this and considering it, you decide that, yes, this is a piece of information I probably should have in helping me to plan for the future, you can go to the www.ipc.org/roadmap, and that should take you to the place that will tell you the various formats you can purchase the thing. You can purchase it for an individual use. You can purchase it for your entire organization as a reference shelf, electronic reference shelf item. There are a variety of levels that you can get into it. Chris Jorgensen?
I just wanted to thank everybody for their participation this morning. It looks like at this point we don't have any questions from the attendees, but I actually did have a couple of questions for Marc and Karen if you're ready.
Ready?
Yeah, the one would be, can you share a case example of a company that used either this year's version of the roadmap or a past roadmap and how that company benefited from it?
Well, I can take it from personal experience. My years in the mill aerospace fabrication industry, like many well-organized companies, we've created our own internal technology roadmap. This was in a board fabrication operation internal to an OEM. And we used the information, the tabular and discussion information, particularly in the printed circuit fabrication section, both to show where we were falling behind in areas that we were, and to help us parse out how we should go to appeal to the higher authorities for new technology insertion. everybody, from the largest to the smallest corporation, has a finite resource pool and multiple organizations compete for it. You have to be able to justify why you're asking for this $1.5 million complex laser imaging system or whatever it was. And the IPC Technology Roadmap is a well-respected and believed source of information that can be used to back up those kinds of requests. I know we did it when we bought our first 2 LDI machines. So, and they also contributed to the information data in our specific technology roadmap for the future, internal to our company.
And by the same token, from my experiences within IBM in particular, we had a very detailed planning process. Some people used to say it started and never stopped, but we would be required to bring outside information. IBM had a very detailed internal roadmap, but as we entered the OEM market and we sold the technology to both IBM and its competitors, one of the things that we were absolutely required to do was to demonstrate that we understood what was going on in the outside and that we were prepared to service the outside market with the level of technology that we had today. So bringing in information in the kind of detail that the IPC roadmap provided, with all of the technical attributes, and laying it side by side with the technical attributes that we had internal to the company, we were able to drive home a point where we had fallen behind or where we were significantly ahead. So we knew how to direct our efforts, and as Marc said, it helped us to justify the capital investments that we wanted to make to keep our company in the area of state-of-the-art, so that we could handle some very complex solutions for the industry.
All right, thank you both. And I actually have one more question. Karen, I'd like for you to address this first, and Marc, if you have any comments as well, please chime in afterwards. But Karen, can you speak to the value of the roadmap for a small to mid-sized company or a circuit board shop that may not be able to afford a chief marketing officer?
Absolutely. The roadmap, because it is a reference of a tremendous amount of information, allows your technical people to go directly into it to gather the information instead of having an entire market research team under a chief technical officer to take a look at the market by doing complete independent research. In other words, the job's been done. There have been experts throughout the industry that have come together to put this information into a single reference document, and it's fairly easy to use this information to compare where you are against the industry and to decide, based on the markets that you want to get into, where you need to go. So I would say that the document, while it is not won't be a chief technical officer, gives you the type of insights that you can support those types of decisions that the CTO would be making.
There's another purely practical consideration. Because of the way we collect the data and de-attribute it, so that the OEMs and design organizations and material suppliers that give us access to their information with the understanding that it will be not attributed to them, the CTO of a given company might be viewed as a competitor, and they're not going to tell them what some of these trends or what their projections are for their specific needs. We can at least provide that in a more generic form. We can provide that insight that would be horribly expensive for an individual company to collect, but also they might not ever get at, because they wouldn't, a company that may have competitive elements might not share that with them. So there are a couple of reasons why this gives you access to information that would be either very expensive or perhaps impossible to get for an individual company.
Great. Thank you both. And thank you again, everybody, for attending this morning's webinar.